Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into something a little different today? We're going to be looking at this whole idea of feel-good productivity.
Feel-good productivity.
Yeah. It's like this idea that, maybe instead of grinding ourselves down to get more done, feeling better actually helps us do more.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So we're going to be pulling from Ali Abdaal's book, Feel-Good Productivity. You know, that productivity YouTuber?
Oh, yeah, I've seen his videos.
He's got a book now, and we've got some excerpts here. So we're going to be unpacking his approach, looking at the research behind it, and hopefully pulling out some stuff you can try yourself.
Awesome. Where do we even begin with feel-good productivity?
Well, I think the best place to start is with Abdaal's own story, right? Because he didn't just, invent this idea out of thin air. He was actually living that whole hustle harder life.
Right. Wasn't he a doctor?
Yeah, a junior doctor. And he talks about this moment, he's working on Christmas Day, totally burned out, and it just hits him.
Yeah.
This isn't working.
Makes sense. It's kind of like the opposite of Santa's workshop, right? Not exactly a feel-good environment.
Totally. And what's interesting is that his aha moment, it wasn't about finding some new productivity hack or time management system. It was about realizing that well-being actually fuels productivity, not the other way around.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this is different, but is there actual science behind it? I mean, how do we know feeling good actually leads to better results?
That's where it gets really cool. Bill brings up this experiment, the candle problem. Have you heard of it?
Rings a bell, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so picture this. You've got a candle, a box of thumbtacks, and some matches. Your goal, attach that candle to a wall.
Okay, so just melt some wax and stick it on.
Yep, there's a catch. That's the trick. You got to think outside the box, literally.
Oh, I see.
And researchers found that people who were in a good mood before tackling this problem, they solved it way faster.
Really? So being happy makes you a better problem solver?
It's not just about being happy-go-lucky. What they found is that positive emotions, they actually help us see more possibilities. Like, our thinking becomes more expansive. We're less stuck in a rut.
Interesting.
So it's like when you're feeling good, you're more likely to spot those solutions that might have been hidden in plain sight before.
I can see how that would apply to work, right? Like you're feeling energized and creative. You're more likely to come up with new ideas or, find better ways to do things.
Exactly. And even just being more open to new opportunities, right? When you're feeling down, you're probably not exactly looking for new challenges.
Makes sense. But all this talk about feeling good, it feels a little, unscientific. Like what's actually happening in our brains when we're feeling these positive emotions?
You're totally right. We got to get into the science a bit. And this is where those feel-good hormones come into play. Those endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin.
Oh, yeah, those. I've heard about them, but I'm not sure I totally get how they work.
We don't need to get too deep into the biology, but think about it this way. Ever notice how after a good workout, you feel like you can conquer the world?
Totally.
That's endorphins at work. They help you think more clearly and creatively. And then there's dopamine. That's the one that gives you that rush of satisfaction when you achieve a goal, which motivates you to do even more.
Okay, I see. So it's like different hormones for different aspects of feeling good, A&E getting things done.
Exactly. Each of these hormones contributes in its own way. And the best part is that feeling good gives a boost to all of them.
Makes sense. But, there's this whole idea that you have to work hard to be successful, and then you feel good as a result. Isn't feeling good usually seen as the reward, not the fuel?
Right. That's the traditional thinking.
Yeah.
But Abdaal argues that it's actually the opposite. He brings up a study, this massive analysis of data from like 250,000 people, and it suggests that in a lot of cases, happiness actually precedes success.
Wow, so feeling good isn't just a byproduct of achievement, it can actually help create it.
And he has this awesome example to illustrate this. Richard Feynman, the physicist.
Oh yeah, I know of him.
Well, after World War II, he was actually struggling. He's kind of lost his passion for physics. It just felt like work.
Oh wow, I can't imagine losing passion for something you love.
But then he figured out how to reignite that spark. He started approaching physics not as this serious, weighty subject, but as something to play with.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do you play with physics?
Well, he started doodling diagrams on napkins, imagining these scenarios that were almost childlike. He let himself get curious again.
So he brought that sense of wonder back into his work.
Exactly. And this shift in mindset, this embrace of playfulness, it actually led to some of his most groundbreaking discoveries.
That's amazing. It really shows that Feeling good and achieving great things, they're not separate. They actually work together.
And speaking of play, Abdaal also talks about this fascinating study where they tracked people's movements using GPS data. They wanted to see if there was a connection between where people went and how they felt.
Okay.
They found that the people who went to more new locations, people who had more variety and adventure in their lives, they reported feeling happier.
So getting out there and experiencing new things actually boosts your mood.
And Abdul ties this back to play by sharing his own experience with World of Warcraft. He was actually addicted to it for a while.
World of Warcraft, that online game.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that it wasn't just the game mechanics that hooked him. He loved the role-playing aspect, stepping into this different persona, this totally different world.
So it's like escaping into a different reality.
Exactly. And he actually says that those skills he developed, like, problem solving and collaboration within the game, they've helped him in his work today.
I never thought about it that way. So even playing video games can have some surprising benefits.
And there's this whole idea of different play personalities, which I find so fascinating. Dr. Stuart Brown, he's a researcher who's studied play for his whole career, and he identifies 8 different types.
8? What are they?
Well, there's the collector, the joker, the kinesthete, just to name a few. It's like each personality has its own unique way of engaging with the world and finding joy.
I wonder what my play personality is.
Right. I'm thinking about it too. But the point is that once you figure out your dominant play personality, the magic happens when you can bring more of that playfulness into your work and life.
So instead of just working harder, we should try to make work feel better.
That's the whole idea behind feel-good productivity. And speaking of making work feel better, I think it's time to tackle something we all struggle with: procrastination.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I'm always putting things off.
Me too. But Abdal's approach isn't about just powering through it. It's about understanding the reasons why we procrastinate. He calls them blockers, and they're all tied to how we're feeling.
Blockers, huh? Okay, tell me more.
Blockers, huh? Okay, tell me more.
So Abdaal identifies 3 main blockers: uncertainty, fear, and inertia. They all kind of feed into each other,
Okay, let's break them down. Uncertainty. What does that even mean in the context of getting things done?
It's that feeling of being lost, Like you don't know where to start on a project, or the goals are just kind of fuzzy. That lack of clarity, it can be paralyzing.
Oh yeah, I totally get that. It's like suddenly organizing my desk seems way more appealing than tackling that big report that's due.
Exactly. And that's where procrastination comes in. So to combat uncertainty, Abdaal suggests this technique he calls commander's intent.
Commander's intent. Okay, now we're getting serious.
It's a military term, but it's actually really simple. It's all about understanding the why behind what you're doing, not just the tasks themselves, but the ultimate purpose.
Okay, so it's like, instead of just clean the kitchen, it's clean the kitchen so you can enjoy cooking a delicious meal with your family.
Exactly. You're connecting the task to a deeper meaning, something that motivates you.
So even if cleaning the kitchen isn't super fun, you're doing it for a reason that is.
Right. And Abdaal actually uses the example of D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy.
D-Day.
Wow.
Okay, this is a serious commander's intent.
Well, what's interesting is that the original plans, they went totally sideways. But what kept things from completely falling apart was that the commanders, they had clearly communicated the overall objective.
So everyone knew the why, even when things got chaotic.
And they were able to make decisions on the fly because they knew what they were ultimately trying to achieve.
I can see how that applies to any project, right? Right. Even if things don't go according to plan, if you have that clear purpose, it keeps you grounded.
And to really nail down your why, Abdaal recommends this exercise called the 5 whys. You just keep asking yourself why until you get to the core of what you're truly after.
Okay, that's a good one. I'm going to try that. So uncertainty, check. But then there's fear. And honestly, even the smallest tasks can sometimes feel terrifying.
Oh yeah, fear is a sneaky one. And it's not always about big, scary things. It's often those everyday anxieties that hold us back.
Fear of failure, fear of judgment, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And sometimes it's hard to even admit that we're scared, so we make excuses instead of facing it head on.
Yeah, I'm not procrastinating, I'm just waiting for the right time to start.
But Abdaal argues that acknowledging those fears, that's the first step to overcoming them. Shine a light on them instead of letting them lurk in the shadows.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? It's one thing to say face your fears, but it's another thing to actually do it.
Well, one technique he suggests is the 10-10-10 rule. Ask yourself, will this matter in 10 minutes, 10 weeks, 10 years? It helps you gain perspective.
I love that. Suddenly that presentation I'm dreading doesn't seem quite so scary when I think about it in the grand scheme of things.
Right. And Abdal also points out that we're often way harder on ourselves than anyone else is. He calls it the spotlight effect. Like, we think everyone's judging our every move, when in reality, they're probably too busy worrying about their own spotlights.
Oh, that's so true. We build these things up in our heads, and they're often way worse than the reality.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Abdal talks about the Batman effect. Research has shown that kids actually perform better when they embody a confident alter ego.
The Batman effect. Like I could channel my inner superhero to conquer my fear of public speaking. I kind of love that.
Exactly. And it actually works.
Yeah.
Abdal even uses this himself for presentations. He has this specific alter ego he steps into, and it helps him overcome his nerves and deliver his best performance.
That's so clever. Okay, so we've tackled uncertainty and fear.
Yeah.
But what about that feeling of just being stuck? Like, that I don't even know where to begin feeling. That's inertia, right?
Inertia is definitely a powerful force, but Abdal has some really practical solutions for this one too. He talks a lot about friction, those little obstacles between you and taking action.
Friction. Okay, give me an example.
He uses the example of wanting to learn guitar. For the longest time, he just couldn't get himself to practice. But then he moved his guitar from this hidden corner to the middle of his living room.
Oh, I see. By making it more visible, he was basically giving himself a visual reminder, but also making it easier to just pick it up and play.
Exactly. Less friction, more action. And he has a similar tip for digital distractions. He recommends a digital declutter day where you go through your apps and devices and just ruthlessly eliminate anything that's not serving you.
Ooh, need to do that. I spend way too much time scrolling through things that don't actually matter.
It's digital clutter, plain and simple. And just like physical clutter, it weighs us down and makes it harder to focus.
So decluttering our digital spaces can actually free up mental space for more productive and fulfilling activities. Okay, so now my phone is clean and my guitar is staring at me, but I still can't seem to get started on that big project. What's the trick?
Abdal is a big fan of the 5-minute rule. Commit to working on a task for just 5 minutes. That's it.
Because 5 minutes feels way less intimidating than like 5 hours.
Exactly. And often, once you get started, that initial inertia is broken and you find yourself wanting to keep going.
It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
And speaking of journeys, Abdal talks about how Brandon Sanderson, the fantasy author, stays on track. He's known for these massive books, and he has these strict deadlines, so he meticulously tracks his word count and celebrates every milestone, no matter how small.
It's like turning that big, daunting task into a series of smaller, more manageable wins. And who doesn't love celebrating a win, right?
And research actually shows that tracking your progress increases your chances of achieving your goals. But sometimes, even with all these techniques, we need a little extra help.
Yeah, sometimes willpower just isn't enough. What do you do when you need that extra push?
That's where accountability comes in. Abdal suggests finding an accountability buddy, someone who can provide encouragement, support, and maybe a little nudge when you need it.
Because it's definitely easier to let yourself down than to disappoint someone else.
Yeah.
But how do you find the right person for that?
It's about finding someone supportive, but also someone who will challenge you and hold you accountable to your goals. Like, think of it as having a personal cheerleader and a coach all rolled into one.
That's a great analogy. But what about when we inevitably do slip up? We're talking about feel-good productivity. But beating yourself up for procrastinating doesn't exactly feel very good.
That's where self-forgiveness comes in. It's so crucial. Abdal even mentions this study where they found that students who forgave themselves for procrastinating were actually more productive in the long run.
So instead of dwelling on the past, it's more productive to just focus on moving forward. It sounds like this whole section on procrastination has really been about understanding ourselves better, not just trying to force ourselves into productivity.
Exactly. It's about making work feel better, not just making ourselves work harder. But how do we sustain this feel-good approach over time? Because even with all these great techniques, burnout is still a real risk, right?
That's what I'm wondering. It feels like this is all about finding a balance, which can be tricky. I feel like this is all about finding a balance, which can be tricky.
It is tricky. But the good news is that Abdal has some great insights into how to avoid burnout. He actually breaks burnout down into 3 different types: overexertion burnout, depletion burnout, and misalignment burnout.
Okay, 3 different types.
Yeah.
That's already making me feel a little less overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Let's start with overexertion burnout. What does that look like?
Think of it like sprinting a marathon. You might start strong, but you're going to burn out fast. It's that classic hustle harder mentality gone wrong. You're taking on too much, working too many hours, and never giving yourself a chance to recover.
So it's like that go, go, go mentality that's so common these days. But how do you actually break free from that? It feels like our whole culture celebrates being busy all the time.
It's definitely a challenge, but Abdaal uses this really cool analogy to explain this. He talks about LeBron James, the basketball superstar.
LeBron James. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does basketball have to do with burnout?
Well, if you watch LeBron closely, you'll notice something interesting. When he's not directly involved in the play, he's often one of the slowest guys on the court. He's walking, conserving his energy, not wasting effort on unnecessary movements.
So he's being strategic about his energy.
Exactly. And that strategic approach to energy management, that's a big part of why he's been able to stay at the top of his game for so long.
He's playing the long game, not burning himself out in a few seasons.
Right. And Abdaal suggests we can all learn something from LeBron. Instead of constantly sprinting, we need to pace ourselves, conserve our energy so we can go the distance.
Okay, but how do we actually do that in our everyday lives?
Well, the first step is to become more aware of your own energy levels throughout the day. When do you feel most productive? When do you hit those slumps?
Oh yeah, I definitely have those afternoon slumps.
We all do, but instead of trying to push through them, try scheduling in breaks during those times.
So like actually putting it on my calendar.
Exactly. Treat your breaks like important meetings. And this is where learning to say no becomes crucial. Start saying no to commitments that drain your energy or don't align with your goals.
The power of no. I know it's important, but it can be so hard to actually do.
It takes practice, but it's so worth it. And to really get a handle on this, Abdaal recommends creating what he calls an energy investment portfolio. It's about being intentional with how you spend your time and energy.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
How does it work?
Start by making a list of all your dreams and ambitions, those things you'd love to do someday. Then make a separate list of your active investments, the projects you're actually working on right now.
So it's about prioritizing, focusing on what truly matters in this moment.
Exactly. And to avoid spreading yourself too thin, keep that active investments list short. No more than 5 things, ideally even fewer. And here's another great tip. Anytime someone asks you to commit to something, ask yourself, would I be excited about this commitment if it was happening tomorrow?
That's a good one. It helps you cut through the noise and focus on what truly matters.
Okay, so we've covered overexertion burnout. What about depletion burnout? How is that different?
Think of your internal battery. Depletion burnout is what happens when you consistently fail to recharge. You're not getting enough sleep, you're neglecting your physical and emotional needs, and you're running on fumes.
Like trying to run your phone on 1% battery all the time. It's not sustainable.
Exactly. And the crazy part is, it can sneak up on you. You might not even realize it's happening until you're completely exhausted. So how do we combat this? By recharging. Abdaal talks about 2 main types of recharging: creative recharging and natural recharging.
Okay, so we're plugging back into the energy source. Tell me more about creative recharging.
It's all about those activities that spark joy and curiosity, the things that make you feel energized and in the flow. Think hobbies, passion projects, anything that allows you to tap into your creativity and get lost in the moment. So it's not about checking things off a to-do list, it's about doing things that actually feel good. But what if you've kind of lost touch with what you actually enjoy doing? Where do you even begin?
Abdaal suggests looking for activities that have these 4 key characteristics: controllable, attention-grabbing, liberating, and meaningful. He even came up with an acronym for it, CALL-M.
I love a good acronym. Okay, so controllable meaning I have some sense of agency over the activity, right? Something I choose to do.
Exactly. And attention-grabbing meaning it truly captures your interest and focus. Liberating means it provides a break from your usual routines and responsibilities. And meaningful because it connects to something you value, something that gives you a sense of purpose.
Those are really helpful guidelines. I could already think of a few activities that fit that description. So what about natural recharging?
This is where we tap into the restorative power of nature. Spending time outdoors has been proven to lower stress, improve mood, and even boost cognitive function.
I know I always feel better after a walk in the park, but I never realized there was actual science behind it.
It's not just a feeling, it's a real phenomenon. And the good news is you don't need a week-long wilderness retreat to reap the benefits. Even small doses of nature can make a big difference.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Take a walk during your lunch break, Bring some plants into your workspace. Even just listening to nature sounds can have a calming effect.
I love all of those. Okay, so we've covered overexertion and depletion burnout. That leaves us with misalignment burnout. What is that exactly?
This one's all about a lack of purpose and meaning in your work. You might be going through the motions, checking things off your list, but you're not truly fulfilled. It's like you're on autopilot, but you're not sure where you're headed or why.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of being stuck in a rut, even if they're outwardly successful. So how do you combat misalignment burnout?
It often requires some bigger changes, which can feel daunting. You might need to reassess your goals, your values, or even your career path. But there are some powerful exercises that can help with this. Have you ever heard of the eulogy method?
The eulogy method. Okay, that sounds a little intense.
It's about imagining your own funeral and thinking about what you'd want people to say about you. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? What impact do you want to have on the world?
Wow, that really puts things into perspective.
It forces you to think about what truly matters, not just what looks good on a resume. Another technique Abdaal suggests is the 12-month celebration. Imagine yourself a year from now, celebrating all the progress you've made. What have you accomplished? What are you most proud of?
I love that. It's like a vision board, but for your whole life.
Exactly. It's a great way to visualize success and create a roadmap for achieving those goals that are aligned with your values. But even with a clear vision, those big goals can sometimes feel overwhelming. So Abdaal recommends breaking them down into smaller, more manageable steps. He calls them alignment quests.
Alignment quests. I love that. So how do you create an alignment quest?
Choose 3 specific actions you can take each day to move you closer to your bigger goals. They don't have to be huge. Even small steps can make a big difference over time.
It's about making consistent progress, even if it's just a few small steps each day.
And finally, remember this is a journey. Approach it with curiosity and be open to experimenting. Try different techniques, see what works for you, and adjust your approach as you learn and grow.
Because there's no one-size-fits-all solution to productivity or to avoiding burnout.
That's the beauty of it. It's about finding what feels good for you, what helps you do your best work, and what allows you to live a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Well, that was a deep dive into feel-good productivity. We've covered a lot, but I think the takeaway message is clear. Productivity isn't about pushing ourselves to the limit. It's about finding ways to make work feel better so we can do more of what truly matters to us.
And by prioritizing our well-being, understanding our emotions, and overcoming those blocks, we can unlock a level of productivity that's sustainable and deeply fulfilling.
So as you go about your week, think about the small changes you can make to approach your work with a more playful, energized, and purpose-driven mindset. What would it look like to really prioritize your well-being, to tap into your play personality, to overcome those fears and align your actions with your values? We'd love to hear about your own feel-good productivity experiments. Share your insights with us on social media. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep feeling good.